So for the last few months, the Bose Smart Soundbar 600 has been my go-to and favorite soundbar to recommend. But today, we're going to see how both the JBL Bar 300 and the Sony S2000, two new soundbars for 2023, how they compare to the Bose Smart Soundbar 600. Now, overall, all three of these soundbars are very different from one another, so let's see which one's right for you. Regarding pricing, the JBL Bar 300 has a retail price of $400, and I do feel that this can be a deciding factor for some people because the Bar 300 is $100 cheaper than these other two soundbars because both the Bose and Sony retail for $500. However, I do expect all of these soundbars to go on sale on a regular basis, so if you want to pick any of these soundbars up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, pick up a Big Head approved hat, link down below. We've got trucker hats and snapbacks. By buying a hat, you help the unbiased and unsponsored videos coming, and it also helps us cover more products and produce more versus videos. Thank you to everyone who's already bought a hat, and look out for more designs coming soon. And also, please remember to hit that like button and let's get subscribed. Now first, I do have to point out that in this video, we're only going to be focusing on the soundbars themselves because with both the Bose and Sony, you can always build them out with external satellite speakers and or an external subwoofer. And this can actually be a deciding factor for some other people because with the JBL, you can't build it out. But the important thing is that in this video, we're only going to be focusing on the soundbars themselves. But also keep in mind, all three of these soundbars are fully self-contained soundbars, as in they don't need an external subwoofer like with some other soundbars out there. And you know, depending on your setup, maybe you might not need or want an external subwoofer because, for example, if you have a small bedroom or a small living room, you just don't want to have to cram an external subwoofer into your setup. Now, when it comes to design, all of these soundbars are relatively compact. However, I do have to point out that the Sony has the largest footprint here, it's the heaviest soundbar here, and it also has an external power brick that you have to worry about. Now, even though the Sony does come included with a few screws so that you can wall mount it, I do feel that this is the hardest soundbar here to wall mount because it has that very large footprint, it's relatively heavy, and it does have that external power brick that you have to hide somehow. But then there's the JBL Bar 300, which I feel is the easiest soundbar here to wall mount because it is the lightest soundbar here, it is a little thinner than the Sony S2000, and it also comes included with a wall mounting kit, and also there's no external power brick that you have to worry about hiding. And finally, there's the Bose Smart Soundbar 600, which I also feel is an easy soundbar to wall mount, but it does not come included with a wall mounting kit. That's sold separately. But then there are the ports on these soundbars. And now the ports on both the Bose and Sony are pretty simple. You have an HDMI eARC port that goes connected to your TV, and there's an optical port just in case your TV doesn't have an HDMI ARC port. Now, with the Bose, you can always plug in an external subwoofer if you wanted to, and with the Sony, there is a USB-A port so that you can plug in a USB stick and play music off of it. But then there's the JBL Bar 300, which has a lot more ports to it. Now you've got your HDMI eARC port that goes connected to your TV, but it also has an optical port. But the Bar 300 also has an HDMI in port that has support for 4K, HDR10, and Dolby Vision. So if you want, you can plug in your Blu-ray player or PlayStation directly into this soundbar. Now the Bar 300 also has a USB-A port, just like the Sony S2000, so you can plug in a USB stick and play music off of it, but this soundbar also has an Ethernet port, so if you wanted to, you can always hardwire this soundbar directly into your network. But the most important thing here is I do have to point out that all three of these soundbars do come included with a decent HDMI cable included in the box. Now, when it comes to wireless connectivity, all three of these soundbars have support for Bluetooth, which is good, but with both the Bose and JBL, they both have support for AirPlay and Chromecast, which is just a lot more versatile than Bluetooth, because if you're connected to the same Wi-Fi network as either of these two soundbars, you can always stream music to them. But also with the Bose, if you wanted to, you can always use it as a smart speaker. But personally, I never use my soundbar as a smart speaker because I don't want my movies to be accidentally interrupted. Now, all of these soundbars also come included with decent remotes, but personally, I never use the remotes on my soundbars, and instead, I just use their apps. And thankfully, I can finally say that all three of these soundbars have really well designed and laid out apps. You can easily adjust their settings and adjust their sound to your liking. This isn't how it was in the past, where some soundbars just didn't have an app, or one soundbar had a terrible app. All three of these apps are sleek and easy to use. However, with the Sony S2000, if you were to use it with a Sony Bravia TV, then you might not even have to use their remote or its app all that often, because all of the control settings can be toggled directly from the TV itself. And this is something that you just can't do with either of JBL's or Bose's soundbars, because neither JBL or Bose make any TVs. But with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the sound of these soundbars. Now, when it comes to speaker setups, all three of these soundbars are very different from one another. Now, first off, like I mentioned earlier, all three of these soundbars are self-contained soundbars, as in they don't need an external subwoofer to produce their bass. Now, the JBL Bar 300 has 4 frontward firing speakers, which are all located in the center. It has an exhaust port that shoots out the back, and there are dual tweeters that shoot out the sides. The Sony has a total of 3 speakers that shoot out the front, and it has a dual frontward firing subwoofers with exhaust ports that shoot out the sides. And finally, there's the Bose, which has a frontward firing tweeter, and it has a total of 4 speakers on it. 2 on each side, which are angled out a little bit, and there are 2 upward firing ones, giving this soundbar true Dolby Atmos support. And it has dual bass chambers with exhaust ports that shoot out the back. But now we're going to jump into the sound test. All 3 of these soundbars are playing at 75% volume, and they're all using my preferred EQ settings.
I know I've broken promises. I'm way too good at keeping you from getting here. I've seen exactly how this ends. I never get too close, afraid to lose again. 'Cause I'm thinking back to 17, when I was young and so naive, falling into love like such a fool. Yeah, I was dumb, but she was me. It broke my trust, and honestly, I never wanna feel that hurt again. I'm so done breaking down my walls for someone to break me till I fall apart. Loneliness is not that hard. And I'm over, waiting for a sense of closure, trying to cover up these scars, like fixing my broken heart.
Now first, when it comes to the max volume performance of these soundbars, all three of these soundbars get equally as loud as one another. And they're all going to be best suited for a small or medium-sized living room or bedroom. However, I will say that both the Bose and Sony do an okay job of filling a larger room with sound, and I feel that's because the Bose does have a brighter sound signature to it, and the Sony does have a lot more bass to it, whereas the JBL just has a much harder time keeping up. And I do feel that's because of its lack of bass. And speaking of bass, the JBL Bar 300 does have the least amount of physicality in its bass here. With the Bar 300, you can hear the bass, but you can't necessarily feel it, which means you're not necessarily going to be able to feel what's happening on the screen. Whereas with the Bose, this soundbar does a much better job of actually letting you feel what's happening on the screen. Now, don't expect the bass on the soundbar to ferociously rattle any walls, but it's a lot more physical than the Bar 300, and it should be enough to satiate most people, especially if you're just using this soundbar in a smaller living room or bedroom. But then there's the Sony S2000, whose standout characteristic is the bass. With this soundbar, you can actually feel what's happening on the screen a lot better than with these other two soundbars, but also the bass on this soundbar just resonates a lot deeper and a lot smoother than the bass found on these other two soundbars. So plainly said, if you're looking for a fully self-contained soundbar that has a ton of bass to it all on its own, because maybe you just don't want or have the room for an external subwoofer, then the Sony S2000 is a great option. But then there's the instrument separation on these soundbars. And now with the Bar 300, I feel that it has a very strong center channel because all four of its main speakers are mounted here in the middle. But I can't help but feel that its left and right channel separation isn't the best because all you've got are these two tweeters that shoot out the sides. But in general, the Bar 300 is a good option if you just want a soundbar so that you can more easily and more clearly hear dialogue with. But then there's the Sony S2000, which at higher volumes, it's going to give you a very immersive listening experience. Like I mentioned earlier, it has a lot of bass, so just having all that bass is great for your immersiveness, but it also sounds very open. The only thing is that since this soundbar does lean towards a warmer sound signature, at lower volumes, it can be a little hard to actually hear dialogue with the soundbar, even if you have its voice mode feature turned on. But if you're going to focus on a movie and if you're going to crank up the volume, then the S2000 is great at those higher volumes. But finally, there's the Bose Smart Soundbar 600, and its standout characteristic is just how open it sounds. Since the soundbar also has these upward firing drivers, the soundbar isn't just shooting sound directly at you, it's also shooting sound upwards and bouncing it off the ceiling. So the Bose has the best instrument separation here, and it also has true Dolby Atmos support thanks to the upward firing drivers on it. So with all that being said, for me, the Bose Smart Soundbar 600 is still my #1 option when it comes to recommending a soundbar to someone. First off, this soundbar sounds very open thanks to its upward firing drivers, and it also has a decent amount of physicality in its bass. It's a sleek looking soundbar, you can build it out if you want, it's easy enough to wall mount, and it also has AirPlay and Chromecast support. However, these other two soundbars are still good options too. With the JBL Bar 300, this soundbar is a little more affordable than these other two soundbars. It's the easiest soundbar here to wall mount, and it also has the HDMI input, so if you want, you can plug in your Blu-ray player or PlayStation. The only drawback about the Bar 300 is that it's mostly for listening to dialogue with, because it has a very strong center channel, but the left and right channels aren't super easy to tell apart, and also you can't really feel the bass with this soundbar. You can just hear it. And finally, there's the Sony S2000, and this is a great option for someone that wants a lot of bass without the need of an external subwoofer. And even though the soundbar does have a lot of bass to it, it sounds very open and immersive at those higher volumes. And the S2000 is also a great option if you already have a Sony Bravia TV, because all of your menu settings are going to show up directly on the TV itself. The only drawback about this soundbar is that it does have a slightly larger footprint. It does have that external power brick that you have to worry about hiding, and it also doesn't have AirPlay or Chromecast support. However, AirPlay and Chromecast is something that you can do through your TV. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit the like button and get subscribed. If you want to pick any of the products up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch. I made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And you know I can be very particular, so I'll only slap my name on something if I'm really proud of it.